Hey there, Dark Things aficionados. Doug Duncan here. Today we're plunging into the heart of one of history's most spine-chilling mysteries, Jack the Ripper. Get ready for a journey into the sinister alleyways of Victorian London, where the unknown lurks in every shadow. We're about to unveil the secrets that history tried to bury. Stay tuned, hit that subscribe button, and brace yourselves for the dark and ominous tale of Jack the Ripper, only on Darker Things. Back in 1888, London was a whole other world compared to what we're used to now. I mean, it was the biggest capital city on the map. Let me tell you, it was also the darkest and most down-and-out place. Picture this: a whopping 6.9 million folks cramming the streets of Victorian London was just rocking it. Now, in the snazzier neighborhoods, they were spicing things up. Fancy concert halls, restaurants, hotels popping up left and right. But behind the scenes, there was this ominous vibe looking around, like a shadow waiting to spill its secrets. Now, shift gears to the east of London. Whole different ballgame in the East End. Whitechapel, to be exact, was like the belly of the beast, one of the nastiest spots in the whole city. Imagine 250,000 souls trying to make a go of it in this gritty place. Life? Tough as nails. The streets were jam-packed and crime was practically part of the scenery. Living conditions? Don't even get me started. Overcrowded, grimy, and downright unbearable. It was like a dark cloud hanging over the heads of those poor souls just trying to survive. Picture this: the folks in the East End, the ones scraping by in the shadows, living in this dark, twisted labyrinth of sketchy roads and alleyways. Now hold on to your nose, because these paths were practically painted with the nastiest stuff, human and animal mess all over the place. And oh boy, the stench? Absolutely putrid. Like a rotten secret nobody wanted to talk about. Now let's talk about the people grinding away in this gloomy mess. A bunch of them were foreign immigrants barely hanging on to a few shillings after working their tails off for what felt like forever. Money? Scarce. Hours? Long. It was a bleak scene, my friend, where survival meant trudging through the muck and hoping for a glimmer of light in the darkness. Now brace yourself for this dark tale. So the women in these slums were dealt a rough hand, and a lot of them ended up resorting to the oldest hustle in the book: prostitution, just to put food on their tables. Now in Whitechapel, we're talking a whopping 1,200 working girls during this time. Most of them were drowning their sorrows in the grimy bars around, looking for clients at all the wrong places. These ladies of the night? Society threw them in the gutter. And get this: if one of them met a tragic end at the hands of a customer, it was like it never even happened. Barely a blip on the radar. Now here's the kicker. London had this dark side that folks wanted to sweep under the rug. But hold on tight, because everything was about to take a chilling turn. Enter the Ripper, a name that would become synonymous with one of the most mysterious and infamous killing sprees in British history. The shadows were about to spill their secrets, my friend. Alright, here's the bone-chilling scene for you. Picture this: August 31st, 1888, and our guy, Charles Cross, is strolling to work along the eerie Bucks Row in Whitechapel. This ain't your sunny day kind of walk. It's a dimly lit alleyway, setting the mood just right. As Charles is minding his own business, he spots a mysterious bundle of dark cloth in a gateway. Thinking it's just some tossed-away tarp, he saunters over to check it out. But oh boy, as he gets closer, the truth unfolds. It's a woman. And here's where it gets eerie. Charles isn't sure if she's met her maker or just drowned her sorrows in the bottle a bit too much. So he hollers for his buddy Robert Paul to join the party. The two of them approach this woman lying flat on her back, skirt hitched up like something straight out of a nightmare. Charles touches her face, still warm, but her hands? Ice cold and limp. Paul gives her chest a few heaves, thinking there's breath maybe left in her. But get this, they don't stick around to play hero. Fearful of being late for work, they pull her skirt back down over her knees and leave her there in the shadows. Like a scene from a twisted movie, right? Okay, buckle up for this chilling tale. So these two guys scrolling through that dark alley, totally clueless about the horror that unfolded. The poor woman, her throat slashed so brutally, her head practically hanging on by a thread. Like a puppet. Creepy, right? Now enter Beat Officer P.C. John Neal. Picture this. He rolls up, lantern in hand, and takes a peek at the scene. The air thick with tension as he spots blood oozing from a gruesome gash on her throat. Imagine the shivers running down his spine. He jots down the twisted details in his statement. Her lying there, clothes all messed up. He touches her arm, still warm from the joints up. Eyes wide open. Bonnet off to the side. Neil's not playing games. He alerts his partner in crime fighting, P.C. John Thane, who in turn gets a doctor named Llewellyn on the scene. Dr. Llewellyn takes a look and declares life extinct. And get this, he figures she hasn't been gone for more than 30 minutes. Meaning the killer's probably lurking nearby, watching the whole grim discovery. News of this grisly murder starts spreading like wildfire through the neighborhood, and a small, uneasy crowd gathers around the body. Eventually they haul her off to the mortuary in Old Montague Street, but the horror doesn't end there. Her post-mortem unveils a nightmare. Throat slashed from left to right, 2 distinct cuts on the left side. The killer didn't stop there. They sliced her through the windpipe, gullet, and even the spinal cord. And if that's not enough, bruising on the jaw and left cheek left a dark signature behind. Welcome to the stuff that nightmares are made of. Picture this gruesome scene. The poor lady's belly sliced open from the ribs, jagged wounds, and even stabs down in the most private of places. All done with a fierce left-handed stroke from a sinister blade. Gives you chills, doesn't it? Let's talk about the victim. 43-year-old Mary Ann Nichols, a.k.a. Polly, a mother of 5 living on Thrall Street. How did she become the first victim of Britain's infamous killer? Well, turns out she had a tough go of it. 3 months earlier, she was in Lambeth Workhouse, and it was workhouse buddy Marianne Monk who identified her lifeless body. Nichols was no stranger to hardship. Prostitute, alcoholic, the whole 9 yards. Just hours before her gruesome end, she was knocking back drinks at the Frying Pan pub. But by 12:30 a.m., she left, headed back to her place at 18 Thrall Street. Here's the twist. She couldn't cough up enough for the 4 pence to crash there. So they turned her out. As she walked off, she shouted off something about getting her DOS money, all the while flaunting a cheery bonnet. Now on her journey, her friend Emily Holland tried to persuade her to go back to the lodging house around 2:30 in the morning. But nope. Nichols had other plans. In the next 75 minutes or so, she crossed paths with her killer, likely lured to a dark getaway at the top of Bucks Road. There, in a gateway, he strangled her, rendering her unconscious before slashing her throat with a wickedly sharp knife. Silent as the grave, he vanished into the London night. As Nichols lay cold and mutilated in the mortuary, her estranged husband, John Nichols, made a heartbreaking visit. Distressed, he reportedly whispered, "I forgive you, as you are for what you have been to me." Her funeral, a somber affair on September 6, 1888, included her father and 2 children. They laid her to rest in the City of London cemetery. But little did they know, this was just the beginning of the nightmare. 2 days post Mary Ann Nichols' funeral, the mystery killer struck again. Coincidentally, right on the same street where Mary took her last walk. Picture this, September 8th, 1888, just before 6 a.m., John Davis, an elderly resident of 29 Hanbury Street, starts his day by heading down the stairs and passageway to open the back door. Now, as he opens the back door, he's hit with a grotesque sight of a mutilated woman. Shocked, he yells out to 2 guys heading to work, and they follow him to the gruesome scene. The woman's face, bloody and turned toward the house, clothes pulled up, revealing her red and white striped stockings. A handkerchief's tied around her throat, and her hands are soaked in blood. Looks like she put up a fight. The position of her hands tell a dark tale. The 3 men, horrified by the scene, scatter in different directions to find a cop. And when the police finally roll in, a crowd's already gathered and they need reinforcements to disperse the crowd. Dr. George Baxter Phillips, the divisional police surgeon, shows up and sadly confirms that this woman's beyond any help. The initial report paints a chilling picture. Her face swollen, turned to the right, tongue protruding between her front teeth, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. Throat cut left to right, clean cuts on the left side of her spine, an attempt to separate the neck bones and other mutilations that scream brutality. The protruding tongue hints at a sinister asphyxiation. Now it gets worse. Her abdomen's completely laid open. Intestines are lifted out and chillingly placed on her shoulders. Pelvic organs? Those are gone without a trace. This killer's got some disturbingly skilled hands. The victim, identified as Annie Chapman, a 45-year-old prostitute, has been laying low in lodgings at number 35 Dorset Street. The darkness is closing in. Alright, let's dive into Annie's twisted backstory. Born in Paddington but raised in Windsor, she tied the knot with John Chapman back in 1869. Now here's where things take a dark turn. Annie and John were heavy drinkers. A match made in a bottle, so to speak. Eventually the booze-fueled roller coaster led them to separation, and to top it off, John kicked the bucket on Christmas Day in 1886, cutting off Annie's allowance. That's not exactly the same sentiment as Grandma got ran over by a reindeer now, is it? Alright, with the money flow gone, Annie took a grim detour into prostitution to make ends meet. But that's not all. She also dipped her toes into croquet work and dabbled in making and selling fake flowers. Those are some real side hustles, right? In the days leading up to her demise, they weren't exactly a walk in the park. Annie found herself in a nasty brawl with fellow lodger Eliza Cooper all over a bar of soap. These are things we thought only happened in male prisons. Things got physical, and some of the bruises on Annie's face during the post-mortem were pinned on this ugly dispute. Little did she know, she was already on a collision course with pain. Unbeknownst to her, Annie was in the advanced stages of lung and brain disease, a deadly combo with no medical cure in sight. But fate had something much more brutal in store for her. Here's a chilling tidbit. Annie Chapman is the only Ripper victim with a photograph from her living days, a haunting reminder of the person she once was before the darkness swallowed her whole. Alright, brace yourselves for this eerie night. Picture this, 1 a.m. September 30th, 1888. Louis Dimschutz is navigating Dudfield's yard with his pony and cart off Berners Street. Now his pony's not having it, shying left and flat out refusing to move forward. Louis scans the area and spots this dark mound on the ground. Curiosity piqued, he gets closer, prodding it with his whip. No response. Fighting the gusty wind, he lights a match to shed some light on the situation. Just enough time to see his woman lying there. At first, he's thinking it might be his wife. Rushes to a nearby club, only to find his wife safe. But the chilling discovery is shared with the drinkers in the club. Some woman unsure if she's just plastered or worse. Back to the scene he goes, this time armed with a candle. The grim truth hits him like a ton of bricks. She's dead, throat slashed. Cops are on the case, arriving to a small crowd around the lifeless body. Dr. Blackwell rolls in around 1:16 a.m. and pronounces the woman unalive. The police do a quick sweep of the area, and by 4:30 a.m., the body's moved to St. George's Mortuary with PC Albert Collins washing away the blood from the yard. And this is where it gets darker. Dr. Blackwell notes a check silk scarf pulled tightly around the woman's neck. At the inquest, he drops a chilling theory. The killer grabbed the back of the scarf, yanked the victim backward onto the ground. Couldn't say if her throat was cut while standing or after the sinister tug-of-war. One that blade sliced through the windpipe, though? She'd be silent, bleeding out in a minute and a half, while the shadows closed in. So this time around, it looks like our mystery killer was in a rush. Unlike the others, the body wasn't torn apart. The unfortunate soul was later identified as Elizabeth Stride, a 45-year-old Swedish-born prostitute with a haunting past. Was this the work of Jack the Ripper, or did we have a copycat killer in the midst? Back in the day, Elizabeth and Don Thomas Stride opened a coffee shop, but life took a dark turn. By 1877, she found herself in the workhouse, and by 1881, her marriage to John crumbled just before his death. On the fateful day of her murder, Elizabeth spent the day cleaning rooms, earning a measly 6 pence. After that, it was straight to the Queen's Head pub. Later, back at the lodging house, she borrowed clothes, brushed from a fellow lodger, Charles Preston, before hitting the streets again. Now here's where it gets eerie. Elizabeth was seen multiple times with a man throughout the evening. The last sighting, just before she met her demise, was by Israel Swartz at 12:45 a.m. on Bunner Street. According to Swartz, he saw her being thrown to the ground by an unknown man. And if his story holds water, that unknown man was most likely Jack the Ripper. Meanwhile, not far away, another woman named Catherine Eddowes, freshly released from Bishopsgate Police Station, was making her way into the shadows. She'd been arrested the night before for being drunk and disorderly, but was up and asking to leave by 12:15 a.m. On her release, she gave the name Mary Ann Kelly of 6 Fashion Street and disappeared into the darkness. Now fast forward to Meter Square around 1:44 a.m. P.C. Watkins, patrolling all night, turns into the square and is met with a gut-wrenching sight. A woman lying in a pool of blood, clothes thrown up over her waist. He immediately calls for backup. Dr. George William Sakura arrives, examines the body, and declares life extinct. The shadows are closing in tighter. Now, here's the grim aftermath. So the guy at the inquest spills the unsettling deets. He figures the murder spot in Meter Square was probably the darkest corner, but there was enough light for the killer to do their gruesome work. According to him, the poor woman's death would have been instant once the murderer cut the windpipe and blood vessels. Now here's the creepy part. He doesn't think the killer was some anatomy whiz. The coroner wonders if the assailant would be drenched in blood. His response? Not necessarily. But wait. The post-mortem exposes the horror, her face brutally mutilated, throat slashed to the bone, a mirror image of Annie Chapman's fate. Stomach, grotesquely injured. Intestines, chillingly placed outside the body. Left kidney gone, and part of her womb is missing. The darkness at its peak. At the mortuary, they identified the victim as Catherine Eddowes, a 46-year-old occasional prostitute from Wolverhampton. She claimed to be married to Thomas Conway, a former soldier, a war hero, but no record of the marriage could ever be found. They had 2 sons and a daughter, but by 1881, separation hit, and Eddowes took custody of her daughter, Anne Conway, apparently putting Anne out on the street as a prostitute as well. Here's the twist. She moved into the lodging house on Flower and Dean Street, shacked up with John Kelly, and then, while they were still together, when she hit her demise. An interesting note, on September 28, 1888, she spent the night in the casual ward of the Shoe Lane workhouse. Rumor has it she told the superintendent when she came back to earn the reward for the Whitechapel murder's capture, claiming she knew who he was, and the superintendent warned her about the danger. But she brushed it off with an unsettling reply, "Ha! No fear of that." The shadows are now whispering darker secrets. Alright, well, buckle up for a dark twist leading to Mary Kelly's tragic end. The day before her murder, she grabbed breakfast with Kelly. They split ways, and she mentioned heading to Bermondsey to borrow money from her daughter. And he never saw her alive again. Now, after the audacious double murder, a chilling clue emerges. The killer, fresh from Catherine Eddowes' demise, heads east, straight into the heart of police activity. Some think he's a local seeking refuge in the safety of his home. He slips past officers unnoticed, blending into the shadow of his cobblestone alleys. In Goulston Street, he tears a piece of Catherine's apron, wipes his bloody blade, and vanishes into the night. Enter PC Alfred Long, patrolling Goulston Street at 2:55 a.m. He spots the apron on the floor, but here's the chilling part. Written on the wall above it in chalk, "The Jews are the men that will not be blamed for nothing." Police, fearing a surge in anti-Semitism and violence, hastily wipe it away. The potential Ripper's message erased before photographs could be taken, leaving investigators in the dark. The Ripper's final victim, 25-year-old Mary Kelly, stands out from the others. Well-liked, untouched by the ravages of alcohol and prostitution. Born in Limerick, Ireland, she moved to Wales as a child, married a collier who met a tragic end in a pit explosion. She worked in high-class brothels in West End before finding herself turned out and abandoned in East End. Her story, however, has gaps. Joseph Barnett, an unemployed fish porter, lived with her until their volatile relationship and financial struggles led to a breakup. Despite parting ways, they remained on good terms. The night before her death, Barnett paid her a brief visit. After he left at 8 p.m., Kelly went out again at 11:45 p.m., then returned with a stout, scruffy-faced man in his 30s, sporting a curly mustache and a dapper hat. Drunk, she mentioned singing it, which was a usual occurrence when she was intoxicated. Between midnight and 1 a.m. on November 9th, 1888, neighbors heard her singing about violets plucked from her mother's grave. Spotted again at 2 a.m. by George Hutchinson on Commercial Street, she asked him for 6 pence. He declined. She walked off, engaging in conversation with the mysterious man. The shadows deepen as Mary Kelly walks closer to her fate. George decides to follow the pair back to Miller's Court, where Kelly leads the man into a room. Picture this: man is pale, small mustache, dark hair, bushy eyebrows, dapper hat, long dark coat, and overboots. He's carrying a small parcel. George even notes that he has somewhat of a Jewish appearance about him. In the eerie hours, neighbors report a faint cry of murder drifting from Mary's room. Fast forward to 10:45 a.m. Thomas Bauer goes to 13 Miller's Court for Mary, Kelly's overdue rent. No reply. He peers through the window. What he sees next is like 2 lumps of meat sitting on a bedside table. Alarmed, he alerts the police. Mary Kelly, beyond recognition, mutilated in the most horrific way. Her body is slumped on a blood-soaked bed. Her entire abdominal cavity emptied. Contents deliberately placed beneath her head and on the table. Her breasts cut off. Her face hacked away. Nose, cheeks, eyebrows, and ears are partially removed. Her heart? Gone. The cause of death? Severance of the carotid artery in the neck. This is by far the most brutal of all the murders. Mary Jane Kelly finds her final rest at the Roman Catholic cemetery at Leytonstone. Joseph Barnett returns the funeral, but Mary's family, as reported in the Daily Telegraph, could be traced to bid her farewell. Her grave, a somber marker at St. Patrick's Roman Catholic Cemetery in London. The shadows whisper dark secrets over her resting place. Back in the early days of the police digging into this nightmare, they toyed with the idea that these murders might be some gang turf war. But nah, that got tossed out the window pretty quick. They shifted focus to a lone wolf, someone who knew the area like a back of their twisted hand. That's when Inspector Frederick George Aberline stepped into the spotlight. They figured this local know-how could crack this nut wide open. The plan? Hope that Aberline's street smarts and connections with the underworld might grease the wheels and make someone spill the beans for the right price. Well, turns out, they were dead wrong. The early investigation, well, let's just say it's a carnival of mistakes, a comedy of errors. And if that wasn't enough, the press coverage? More of a curse than a blessing. Now, unlike today, where the press can actually be useful in tracking down a suspect, Victorian London journalists were a different breed. Sneaky, bribing officers for info, or if that failed, just making up some juicy stories. Some even went the extra mile, disguising themselves as women and strolling the Whitechapel streets, hoping to lure Jack the Ripper and make him the next headline. Now, this chaotic reporting spun a web of false leads, giving Jack the Ripper free rein to keep prowling the shadows. What might have helped? A decent artist's impression. You see, many witnesses probably crossed paths with this lunatic, but the illustrations released were just generic, evil-looking dudes. More like what they thought he would be, not what the eyewitnesses described. The streets remained his haunting ground, thanks to the swirl of confusion and twisted portrayals. Now, let's dive into the twisted letters that added fuel to this dark saga. Amidst the investigation, the police find themselves drowning in letters, mostly from pranksters playing games with the shadows. Yet, 3 letters emerged from the abyss, casting an eerie glow. First up for examination, the Dear Boss letter, a chilling note dated September 25, 1888. This was initially brushed off as a prank. It clawed its way into the spotlight after Catherine Eddowes met her gruesome end on September 30th. The letter eerily mentioning the clipping of his next victim's ears. Lo and behold, Eddowes was found with one earlobe severed. Then came the Saucy Jack postcard, landing on October 1st, 1888, detailing the double event and boasting the same handwriting as the Dear Boss letter. As if that wasn't enough, enter the From Hell letter, a macabre masterpiece delivered in a small box alongside a half-human kidney. You read that right. Catherine Eddowes' killer had taken the liberty of snatching one of her kidneys. Now you'd think these ominous breadcrumbs would lead somewhere, right? Wrong. Despite the promise they held, the case remained an unsolved enigma. Suspects multiplied like shadows in the night, reaching a mind-boggling 100. Some legit contenders, others just plain absurd. Here's the kicker. Every year like clockwork, authors, former detectives, and amateur sleuths emerge from the darkness unveiling new evidence swearing they've cracked the code of the world's most famous murder mystery. Each tale sounds convincing, adding layers to the shroud of the unsolved. The mystery lingers, a haunting melody echoing through time. Enter our first suspect for contention. Montague Druitt, a name shrouded in the whispers of darkness, stands as a prime suspect in the enigma of Jack the Ripper. Now, there's not much evidence to sling guilt his way, but here's the tale nonetheless. Druitt, the Oxford-educated gent, donned the role of teacher at Blackheath boarding school after graduating in 1881. A barrister's robe was in his future, but fate took a sinister turn. First, both parents met their demise in quick succession. Then came the dismissal from Blackheath School, rumors hinting at his supposed homosexual inclinations. With the weight of his job loss, parental loss, and the mind spiraling into decay, Druitt vanished. Fast forward to December 31st, 1888, his lifeless form discovered adrift in the River Thames. They say he'd been in those cold waters for at least 3 weeks, a tragic end to a troubled soul. Now you might wonder, how did Druitt end up in the Ripper's suspect lineup? Well, aside from fitting description of a sharp-dressed chap in his early 30s with mustache, there's the cryptic quote by Sir Melvin Leslie Macnaghten in his famous memoranda. Macnaghten, with strong opinions about Druitt, hinted at submerged truths lying in the Thames. I've always had strong opinions regarding him, Macnaghten wrote, weaving a mysterious web. Druitt, a 41-year-old doctor, well, not really, he was 31 and a barrister, vanished during the Miller's Court murder. Found floating 7 weeks later, his season ticket between Blackheath and London was a bizarre piece of evidence. Macnaghten dropped hints that Druitt's own family suspected him of being the Whitechapel murderer, alleging sexual insanity. However, what Macnaghten knew, he kept veiled. Although not part of the police force during the Ripper's reign, he danced in the investigation circles from 1889 to 1891, with a few high-ranking friends linked to the Druitt family. Macnaghten claimed to destroy info he had on Druitt to avoid chaos. Oh, and did you catch the inconsistencies in Macnaghten's words? Druitt was 31, not 41, and a barrister, not a doctor. Dark shadows, indeed. Let me take you back to a gloomy morning. April 27, 1896, in the heart of New York. Carl Feigenbaum meets his end in the cold embrace of an electric chair. Officially declared dead at 11:18 a.m. A fitting closure, some might say, for a man who mercilessly plunged a knife into a woman's life before her 16-year-old son. But the tale doesn't end there. Enter his lawyer, William Sanford Lawton, who immediately after the execution drops a bombshell. He boldly claims that Feigenbaum, the just electrocuted one, could be tied to the notorious Jack the Ripper murders in Whitechapel, London. Lawton stakes his professional reputation on it, urging the police to trace Feigenbaum's twisted journey. It's not as far-fetched as it seems. Feigenbaum, a self-confessed psychopath, confessed to Lawton about an insatiable urge to slaughter and mutilate any woman who crossed his path. A German merchant seaman with a knack for extensive travels, he could very well have been in London during the Ripper's reign of terror, not to mention his links to other unsolved murders around the same time, though only convicted for one. In Trevor Marriott's investigation saga Jack the Ripper, the 21st century investigation, the case for Feigenbaum as the Ripper is meticulously laid out, weaving a convincing narrative. Yet as with the Ripper mystery, other suspects cast their shadows. Fast forward to recent years where Ripperologists entertain a chilling notion. Mary Jane Kelly, the Ripper's final victim, might have had a second husband pulling the strings. Enter Francis Craig, a failed journalist married to Elizabeth Weston Davis. The marriage unraveled when Craig unearthed Elizabeth's secret life in prostitution, leading to their divorce in 1886. Driven by obsession, Craig hunted Elizabeth, discovering her new identity, Mary Jane Kelly, and in Whitechapel. His love twisted into disgust and hatred, birthing a sinister plan. He'd murder the other prostitutes before finally slaughtering his estranged wife, all to mask his involvement. This version of Mary Jane Kelly's life gains traction due to the lack of concrete details about her, except for the snippets shared by Joseph Barnett, the man she lived with shortly before her demise. After the gruesome chapter in Whitechapel, Craig left for West London, working as an editor until 1896. In 1903, he took his own life, leaving a chilling note about pain and untold agony. The tale lay dormant for over a century until 2015, when Dr. Wynne Weston Davis, claiming to marry Kelly's great-nephew, unearthed new documents. These included a divorce petition and an affidavit filling in the gaps in Kelly's life. Driven by a mission, he plans to exhume Mary Kelly's body, seeking DNA analysis to unveil the truth behind the Ripper's final victim and expose Craig's motive. It's a dark saga indeed. Picture this, though. Another suspect, Charles Leechmere, lurking in the shadows of the Ripper saga. You might remember him as the one of the chaps that was stumbling upon Mary Ann Nichols' lifeless body in Bucks Road. He masqueraded as Charles Cross at the inquest, a name borrowed from his mother's remarriage to a certain Mr. Cross after his father's demise. Dr. Gareth Norris digs into Leechmere's sinister proximity to all the murder sites in recent analysis. His daily route, a tour past Hanbury Street, Mitre Square, Dorset Street, and Burner Street, placed him eerily near and close to all the scenes of horror. At the time of the murders, Leechmere, 39-year-old driver for Pickford Meats, gathered suspicion. The meaty profession provided a chilling cover for bloodstained clothes, a perfect alibi in the eyes of skeptics. Leechmere's knack for lies, evident in the inconsistencies following Nichols' murder, propelled him into the spotlight in recent years. Some daring investigators now propose a chilling twist. Robert Paul, another witness, stumbled upon the scene as Leechmere carried out the gruesome act. Is it sufficient to label Leechmere the Ripper? Perhaps not conclusively, but believe. Maybe a spin or two persuasive web of arguments and theories entwined in the shadows. Now enter the Victorian diary allegedly scribed by a wealthy cotton merchant, James Maybrick, filled with detailed confessions that only the Ripper would know. It ends with a bone-chilling signature. Yours truly, Jack the Ripper. Yet a cloud of doubt hangs over its authenticity. Ripper experts question its legitimacy, branding it a sophisticated forgery orchestrated by Mike Barrett, the man claiming ownership. Fast forward 25 years, and Robert Smith reignites the debate, asserting the diary's legitimacy based on newfound evidence. Yet the truth remains elusive, shrouded in the mysteries of linked confessions and hidden motives. And now let's waltz into the royal corridors, where the illustrious Prince Albert Victor, fondly known as Eddie, becomes a suspect. A ladies' man with scandals rumored to be glossed over by the palace, and he stands accused posthumously. Philip Julian's 1962 book first floated its theory, sparking bizarre claims of syphilis-induced insanity, or a revenge-driven murder spree orchestrated by his former tutor, James K. Stephen. In a more fantastical twist, Joseph Secret claims Eddie secretly married a girl named Alice Mary Crook, leading to a series of sinister events orchestrated by Queen Victoria herself. Alice's abduction, experienced by royal physician Sir William Gohl, and a sinister conspiracy involving Jack the Ripper. Now, despite the theory's near debunking, it thrives in the realms of motives and novels etching its shadowy narrative. Reality bends in Victorian London's grim streets, where the Ripper left his ghastly mark. The suspects may pile up, and theories intertwine, but the true identity of Jack the Ripper eludes us. The police seem lost in the fog, press sensationalism fueled mass hysteria, and the case officially closed after 4 years of bafflement. Yet over 130 years later, the enigma still endures, haunting the pages of countless books, films, and TV shows, each reenacting the gruesome dance on these desolate streets. Let's not forget, behind the macabre tales were real victims, lives lost in the most grotesque manner. Thankfully, the heinous acts are likely to not repeat in our modern age, where advanced investigative techniques can swiftly catch such a killer. Jack the Ripper's name might linger in the annals of infamy, but the echoes of his reign of terror are confined to the pages of history, reminding us of the chilling mysteries that cannot be fully unveiled. Alright, Darker Things fam, that wraps up our eerie journey into the labyrinth of Jack the Ripper's mysteries. I'm your host, Doug Duncan, and before you go, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We delve into the darkest corners of history, unveiling chilling tales you won't find anywhere else. Don't miss out on future episodes. Subscribing is your ticket into the unknown. Now, if you enjoyed uncovering the shadows with us, give this video a thumbs up. It lets us know you're hungry for more dark and ominous stories. Drop your comments down below. Who do you think Jack the Ripper really was? Share your theories, and let's keep the conversation as mysterious as the streets of Victorian London. And hey, share this video with your fellow dark enthusiasts. Spread the word of Darker Things. We're building a community that embraces the enigmatic. Until next time, stay curious, stay dark, and keep exploring the unknown with Darker Things. As always, I'm your host, Doug Duncan, reminding you that once you enter the dark, you may never be the same.